Thanks for joining us on KARE News Now. I'm Lauren Lemanchek. New this afternoon, a federal judge is stepping in, blocking the Department of Government Efficiency from accessing sensitive personal data from federal agencies. The ruling says the Department of Education and workers may not disclose that information and information on members of 5 union organizations who sued to block that access. Meantime, federal unions are challenging an email sent this weekend to millions of federal workers, asking them to respond with their accomplishments on the job or risk being fired. On social media, Elon Musk says not responding to the email would be considered a resignation. Now, those same unions filed last week to block the Trump administration from firing federal employees. This is all part of President Trump's plan to downsize the federal government and make it more efficient. But as Jay Gray reports, the White House appears to be getting pushback, even from inside the administration.
This morning, millions of federal workers wake up unsure if they'll have a job by the end of the week. President Trump pressing ahead with his aggressive government overhaul, delivering pink slips to employees across at least 18 departments and agencies.
We're removing all of the unnecessary, incompetent, and corrupt bureaucrats from the federal workforce.
Around 1,600 USAID employees laid off late Sunday. A majority of the remaining staff placed on administrative leave.
Waste is pretty much everywhere. People ask, how can you find waste in D.C.?
Billionaire Elon Musk, head of the administration's self-proclaimed Department of Government Efficiency, emailing millions of federal workers over the weekend, asking them to list 5 bullet points outlining what they accomplished last week. Adding on social media, failure to respond before midnight tonight will be taken as a resignation.
What Donald Trump is doing is illegal, it's violative of our Constitution, and it has to be stopped.
That message from Democrats echoed in weekend town hall meetings across the country.
When are you going to wrest control as the Congress back from the executive and stop hurting your constituents?
Pushback also coming from inside the administration. The FBI, State Department, National Institutes of Health, Defense Department, and NSA telling employees to pause on responding or not respond at all to the proof of performance email. Jay Gray, NBC News, Washington.
Developing right now, the U.S. is hitting pause on a plan to house migrants in tents at Guantanamo Bay military base in Cuba. According to a U.S. official who spoke with CNN, there are concerns over the conditions that migrants would face, and the facilities would not meet detention standards because there's no air conditioning or electricity. That official also says that migrants captured in the U.S. illegally are still being housed in the detention facility at Guantanamo Bay and the Migrant Operations Center. Today, the community of West York, Pennsylvania is in mourning. Police there leading a procession this morning for Officer Andrew Duarte, who was shot and killed while responding to a hostage situation at a hospital on Saturday. The gunman was also killed and 5 other people were hurt. Those injured are all expected to be okay. Authorities say while they're still very early in their investigation, they do believe this was a targeted incident. Still, the community is trying to wrap their heads around the tragedy.
I mean, when you go into York Hospital, you have security guards, you have police officer, you have metal detectors. So I believe it should be in every hospital, every school. I mean, we need to keep our people safe. I mean, we are a very strong community. York County is very strong. And with everybody coming together, I think we can make the right changes to prevent this from happening again.
Right now, police are still trying to figure out a motive for the shooting and say the suspect had been in the hospital recently and had a personal connection to one of the patients there. Happening right now, Pope Francis is in critical condition inside an Italian hospital with blood tests showing mild signs of kidney failure as he battles pneumonia in both lungs. Despite that, Vatican officials say that Francis, who was hospitalized more than a week ago, is in good spirits, is eating normally, and needs to focus on rest and recovery. Minnesotans are remembering their connection to the Pope as prayers from around the world are sent his way, hoping for his recovery. Heidi Wigdall's here with more.
We weekend mass at the Basilica of St. Mary in Minneapolis included special prayers for the health of Pope Francis.
I think there is this, this undercurrent of everybody is really worried.
Johan van Paris, director of worship, has met Pope Francis in the past.
He's very humble. He does not like all the pomp and circumstance that surrounds the papacy.
He just loves to be out in people, even when it's 100 degrees.
Benjamin and Mary Moritz of Sleepy Eye met Pope Francis in June 2023.
So this is the Pope's hat.
When he blessed their marriage.
We heard of this other tradition where if you buy the Pope's Zacchetto, which is like the skull cap he wears, you can ask him to switch with you and he'll switch hats with you.
The couple found his tailor to get one of his custom hats.
When he came to bless our marriage, after he did that, I asked him in Italian, and I don't speak Italian, to switch hats with us. And he chuckled, but then he reached out and switched hats with us. And so now I can say I made the Pope laugh.
The immediate impression we journalists had was that this was going to be a pope like no other.
John Davis is a Minneapolis author who covered the Vatican for 30 years, including in his New York Times best-selling book, The Vatican Diaries.
You knew that you weren't going to kiss his ring. He wanted a handshake. He came at you with a handshake. And then he would ask you how you were doing. He'd ask you about your family. He might joke about your book, like he did with me.
Personal stories and prayer now surround the Pope as his health remains uncertain.
Not knowing what's going to happen in the next hours or the next days is a bit emotional for all of us here.
That was Heidi Wigdahl reporting. Well, it's a dark day in Ukraine as the country marks 3 years since its neighbor Russia invaded, sparking a deadly war that's tangled international policy around the world. Now, Ukrainian President Zelensky is upping the ante, saying he's willing to give up his post for peace in his country or membership into the NATO alliance. The war in the region is still raging on, with Russian President Vladimir Putin launching nearly 200 drone attacks overnight. Right now, President Trump is working on a deal with Ukraine where the U.S. would offer security to the country in exchange for the rights to some of the country's most valuable minerals. White House officials say it's a way to get a return on investment in the country, as the U.S. has pumped billions into Ukraine since the war started. A big shakeup is coming to your TV screen. Lester Holt is stepping down as anchor of NBC Nightly News, a job he's had for a decade now. In a memo to staffers, Holt said he will keep hosting Dateline NBC full-time. He will leave the newscast sometime this summer. Now, when he was elevated to that job in 2015, he became the first African-American solo anchor of a weekday network nightly newscast. NBC has not said yet who will fill Holt's spot. Developing right now, coffee giant Starbucks is laying off more than 1,000 corporate workers. In the same announcement, CEO Brian Niccol also says several hundred of other open positions will not be filled. These cuts are not affecting workers at cafes around the world. This is part of the new boss's simplification of the brand, something he hopes will bring more people back into the cafes. The company is also scaling back its menu to make it less confusing to order food and drinks. Stand with St. Paul Brewing. That's the call of the brew pub that says plans for a new affordable housing complex could hurt their business. The city disagrees, though, so Jessica Hart headed there over the weekend to check it out.
On a typical Saturday night, this is what St. Paul Brewing looks like, but the owner is worried a new development by the city could leave many of these seats empty. The historic Hams campus has been through many phases. St. Paul Brewing is just the latest.
I just had a love affair with the entire complex and really had a vision for this being a regional, national destination.
Rob Clapp took over the brew pub over 4 years ago.
Everything I own is here.
And he feels like he's at risk of losing everything.
We just want them to work with us to show us how we survive.
The city of St. Paul is planning a new affordable housing complex and marketplace on the portion of land the city owns at the Hams campus. A plan that would involve developing over 140 units of affordable housing and a city-owned parking lot the brew pub uses for parking.
The future of this lot is housing.
St. Paul City Council member Shaniqua Johnson says they're trying to revitalize a vacant campus.
I don't believe that we're choosing between affordable housing and parking. I don't believe that we're choosing between affordable housing and St. Paul Brewery's St. Paul Brewing's success.
The lot currently has over 140 parking spots. The renovation would have 70 shared parking stalls for the marketplace and St. Paul Brewing.
95% drive, and this isn't a neighborhood like Grand and where Can is, where people can spread out into the artery streets. We're pretty landlocked here.
And without that parking, he feels like his business won't survive the next phase of the Hams campus. In St. Paul, Jessica Hart, KARE 11 News.
Stick with us. More news and weather is coming up after the break.